Welcome back. Here we are at our third session, Krista, for Dyslexia Awareness Month. Once again, I appreciate you being with us. You might want to share for those who are joining us for the first time a little bit about yourself.
Oh wow. Okay. I'm just a mom and I decided to really dig into literacy after really spending probably 7 years somewhere in that range advocating for my son. I didn't know what I was advocating for. I didn't have a word until I got like an anonymous letter in the mail saying, I think your kid is dyslexic, but they're not going to assess him. And it was kind of like it opened up this big new word for me. What is dyslexia, right? I have no idea. I've never heard this word before. And a couple years later, I ended up at Bay Path. And now I have my MSAD and reading and literacy instruction from Bay Path University. And I get to help kids all over the country now. So it's been a crazy journey. And I was so grateful that you, Phyllis, were a part of it with
Well,
me.
well, thank you. And I'm thrilled to share that I am the new program director here at Bay Path University, where we have five different pathways in reading and literacy instruction. We have the MSED, that is both licensure and non-licensure, and we also have an EDS, which is licensure and non-licensure. And we have the Massachusetts Reading Specialist Certification. So I just wanted to share that at the beginning because this is our last time together. I'm going to just call up the PowerPoint that is guiding our conversation for today. So let me share my screen and get that going. And I'm just going to get this to start from this slide. And you can see that, right?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So part three, dyslexia awareness. So, Krista, you want to share a little bit about parts one and two, just kind of for those who haven't been with us?
Yeah, so if you haven't watched part one and two, go back and find those. In part one, we talked about dyslexia and defined it for you. And we also kind of gave you like some information on the use of the term. We also dispelled myths, and I think we spent most of the time in part one talking about the myths. And then in part two, we talked about phonological working memory, attention, sometimes attention deficit disorder. Two, I think we poked in there a little bit. Rapid automatic naming, emotional impact, parents' roles as advocates and partners. We spent a lot of time on that. And we talked about how important it is to have a team with your educators, with your child's teachers, with everybody, have a team. And that it really does take an efficient and effective system for you to successfully advocate for your kid and for the school system to get intervention in place. There's a lot there that we talked about in part two.
So here we are now moving forward into part three. Oop.
Mhm.
Um, and so we're going to just really kind of talk about what to look for in a system approach because we are in a system, right? We're in an institution, we're in schools. And even with homeschooling, there has to be a system that works. So we're going to talk a little bit about what to look for in curriculum, instruction, assessment, the importance of consulting, and we're kind of echoing back to part two where we talked about that collaboration, how important that is to be able to document the interventions that so that we're not staying stuck with something that isn't really working, to document and make a change. And then to also remind everyone that there what the barriers are. You know, there's persistent, insufficient, and or sustained funding in districts and states. And we've already alluded to the lack of targeted professional development for teachers, or just that horse and pony show where you go and you see it once, you come back to your room and you forget that, what did I say? How do I do that?
Oh,
And, insufficient teacher or leadership preparation. And we've mentioned that before, but we're going to kind of revisit that again. So I'm going to have you talk a little bit how important it is in curriculum to have high quality instructional materials, HQIM.
I just want to preface by saying that having a high quality curriculum does not mean that you have to change your curriculum every year. I felt like that was the first thing I just needed to get out there right now because we're experiencing that right now where there's just new curriculum every second. It's like just more. But we need to make sure that that curriculum is adhering to state standards and it's building those foundational skills that our kids need. Um, so that the curriculum is helping guide the educators so that all learners are learning effectively and that they've got those foundational skills in place. So that's number one. And then prevention of curriculum casualties. I love and I hate the word curriculum casualties, but it's just the reality that we're living with right now, that there are some scientifically based core reading programs and there are some that just have no data backing them up at all. And so it is so important that our early reading development programs have that scientifically backed, scientifically based like they've got that. just
Well,
um
that it's based on the science of reading
yes,
and that
yes.
people understand the science of reading isn't just the buzzword phrase out there.
Yeah.
We've talked about that in the past, and that it really is a body of research from many, many disciplines over many years. And
Mhm.
it really dives deep into more than what people have equated it to, which was phonics. We're
Yeah.
talking about semantics and syntax and morphology. Teachers need to even understand grammar and writing and transcription. So that's just a bit of the list, right, that you studied, Krista, here at Bay Path. But I
Yeah.
think when teachers are informed and they have all of the professional development that they need, they can then supplement, not supplant, right? A really good core reading program. And
Mhm.
then those where they have to supplant because it isn't providing, they will have the knowledge and practice background that they need to do that.
Yes. I think too, we were talking about you're talking about a little bit of a modification of the curriculum there, and I think that that's important too when it comes to differentiation for the kiddos that need a little bit of extra help. That curriculum is not always going to be the end all be all. You're going to have to step outside of the box, and having that knowledge to do that is important. And so then we need to kind of know who is making the final decisions and the process involved. Um, because I know that there's a lot of educators that walked into the classroom this year and they had a new curriculum that they had never laid eyes on before. Um, and then, we had talked about you and I multiple times because now I homeschool my children, and there are a lot of challenges in homeschooling and the private sector as well. And we can get into that deeper. I think we're going to circle back around to that later, but there's just a lot. There's a lot going on in that particular aspect as well. So it's not just the public schools, the private schools, but the homeschoolers are also struggling with the same thing.
I agree, and it's really important to shed some light on that. So, when we're looking at instruction, the actual teaching and learning in a classroom, what do we want to look for in a setting? And one of the first things I look for is scientifically established methods and materials that support visual, auditory, tactile, and kinesthetic learning. But also, we call that multimodal. It isn't about a style. It isn't about, multiple intelligences. It's about making sure that a preferred way of getting information is available to all children. And as human persons, we see, we hear, right? We touch and we move. And I've actually had to model some of this with you and your cohort when you were at Bay Path. And I think that really helps, right? It builds that confidence if this isn't something you're really used to doing in your classroom as an educator.
Mhm.
And then the next is the structured approach. Structured literacy approach was first coined by the IDA in 2014, and they've actually improved upon their definitions in 2018. They actually did in their Perspectives Journal a big celebratory article on the structured approach to literacy instruction. But I would like to show the next slide and then kind of move back to this one so that we can understand what do we mean when we are looking for direct, explicit, systematic, cumulative, and diagnostic instruction. So this is kind of what we're looking for. So
Mm-hmm.
direct. Krista, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I know that direct kind of trips people up a little bit. They're not really sure what to expect. So that's why we decided, Phyllis was like, maybe we should put something in there. So direct is clear language, eye contact, facial expressions, and gestures. So are you talking directly to those kiddos, and do they have your attention?
And you're not just married to your lesson plan, like looking down at it all the time, right? Explicit, I'll take that one. We want to introduce the new concept, but at the same time, we're connecting it to what they have mastered. And so the child feels confident, right? They've mastered this, but this we're connecting to it. We're accessing any prior knowledge that the student owns already
Yeah.
about concept. And that we've established in our courses is a little different than background knowledge. Background knowledge is really what the teacher, after accessing the child's prior knowledge, will give in any kind of encounter with a text. So it's
Mhm.
really important to have that distinction. Too often we use the terms interchangeably, but really we've learned that there is a significant difference. And then for our older students, especially middle school and high school, let's establish relevance for why we're doing what we're doing. Why do
Mhm.
I have to learn the sounds of language? I'm 15 years old because that's how your brain is going to create the new neural network that's going to make you an efficient reader. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yes.
So, do you want to take systematic?
Yep. So systematic means that it's evidence-based. There is an evidence-based scope and sequence. So we see this a lot with OG, like we're kind of working on our own here. There's no program, there is an approach, but we kind of have an evidence-based scope and sequence that's guiding us. Same thing with everything else, there should be one. You're going to cycle back with students that need it. And so this is the whole mastery thing that we were talking about earlier, Phyllis. Some kids need a little bit more so that they can master a concept before they move on. And it's important that kids master concepts before they move on. The frequency, duration, size of group, and time of day, those ones are big. Time of day, you have a kid that is like 10 minutes before lunch. Breakfast is no longer holding on. They have very, very little attention. And you're going to throw like the hardest concept of the day at them 10 minutes before lunch. It doesn't work. And we want to make sure that we're being inclusive.
And I think it's important that we document all this because one subtle change in any one of those alterable variables can be the biggest, most positive, pivotal thing for a student, right?
Yeah.
And we never know. So we have to document and then make sure we're looking at those alterable variables within a timely period of monitoring for progress. So then we're going to talk about cumulative. This is yours too because you love mastery. So I'm going to let you have that one.
Yeah. So mastery. I love it. I mean, it's almost the hill that I would die on when it comes to this because we cannot move on when these kids have not mastered. Because what happens then? They get to the next thing and they needed that last concept to kind of come along with them, but they didn't master it. So now they're here and they're literally building on a foundation that's not solid, in my opinion. They need those foundational concepts and they need them to be mastered so that they have the foundation that they need. And so we need to teach to transference, and we need to begin with something simple and build it up. We're not going to start with a horrible hard concept and then throw like the little things on top of that. And we need to begin with concrete to abstract. So this builds up over time. You know, when you're teaching, for example, when I'm working with OG kiddos, we're going to teach them concepts that are very basic. Like we're going to start with the letter M. You know, we have and we're going to move on to a few other concepts. So that, like, literally 5 concepts in, 5 letters in, they can start blending, right? It's like the little tiny things. And then we start moving into bigger things. We're not going to teach them syllabication, you know, before we teach them letters. So that's what that means. The
Right.
key.
And when Krista speaks of OG, she's talking about Orton Gillingham approach, which
Yeah.
is really foundational to many programs that have shown success with
Yeah.
students. So I'm
Some
going
people
to
call it phonics, you
Yes,
know.
but it's not just phonics, which
It's
is
not
so
just phonics.
so sad that people think that's all it is. So I'm going to go to response and feedback because these two really move together, right? We want to make sure that the students have multiple opportunities to respond. Too often, the size of groups can be really too big. I've
Yeah.
seen small group, and there's 10 to 12 students in a small group. That's not what research suggests. 4 to 6 at most, ideally 4. Whole group, yes, small pairs, individuals. And then how are we using our workstations with those concepts that are mastered? Let's have students practice in workstations so that they can constantly be reinforced with that mastery. And
Mhm.
feedback. This is so critical. Peer and instructor feedback together is powerful. It needs to be frequent, but it also needs to be immediate with a corrective model from the teacher or immediate with specific praise. Krista, how many times have you been in a classroom where a teacher will say, "Oh, that's wonderful. That's awesome. That's nice." And then all of a sudden, your your friend next to you says, "She says that all the time to everybody."
Yeah.
Well, that's not specific praise. Specific praise is more to, I like that you were able to identify each one of those digraphs. Look at you. You found the CH for ch, right? And then the teacher and the child understands clearly this is what my learning target was, and I
Yes.
accomplished it, and I have accomplished that, and I have confidence. And that leads me to the metacognitive piece. Really important that students own their learning.
Mhm.
Now, it's more than just thinking about thinking. It is truly owning their learning and having that safe environment where they can ask, I need more practice.
Mhm.
And I love it. And I've shared this in class with you, Krista. I love it when a third grader raises their hand and I'll call on them and they'll say, "I just need a meta moment." And I just love it because then I can find out exactly what they need.
Mhm.
Scaffolding, I'm going to let you take that one.
Scaffolding. Oh boy. How do we help those kiddos that are stuck back here get here with everybody else? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about scaffolding. And so it's interactive, graphic, multisensory. So going back to that multisensory, visual, auditory, tactile, kinesthetic, that's what scaffolding really is. There's a lot to it, but like I said, it really is what you need to help make sure that everybody is on the same page, everybody has mastered, and you're providing those kids with the tools they need to make sure that they're here with everybody else and they're not stuck back here still trying to catch up.
And
So,
and then the really at the beginning, before we get into direct and everything else, we really would be doing diagnostic work. We're going to talk a little bit more about that when we get to assessment, but all our assessments have to be valid and reliable. We also have to take into consideration the anecdotal data that teachers will bring to the table or parents will bring to the table. We want trained administration in all of our assessments, but especially the diagnostic standardized assessments. We want to have analysis and interpretation to inform our decisions, and that takes training and practice and coaching. We want to monitor progress, but here's the big one. In all of this, we want to set reasonable but ambitious goals.
mm,
So I'm going to escape here and go back and start from this slide because we want to finish the last bullet points.
Mhm.
So the one on student-friendly learning targets, this is something that Moss and Brookhart actually wrote a book about, and I incorporate this at BayPath in all of our courses of study, especially our lesson plan. It's really important that a child up front understands, what am I learning? What is my goal? What is my I can statement in student-friendly language? And it isn't enough to put it up on the board once and never visit it again. That's not allowing for metacognition. You really, in the middle of the lesson, have to revisit the I can statement and say to the student, where do you think you are in owning this? And the child, just don't do a thumbs up because everybody's going to put their thumb up. We
Yeah.
really want some evidence for why they're choosing where they are. And it really requires some practice and some actual um, you know, having them feel safe in their environment, and also maybe even giving them some sentence starters at first and how to articulate where they are with a learning target. And
Mhm.
that in the middle becomes formative for the teacher. They can adjust their instruction right then and there during the moments of learning. But at the end, it's a sense of achievement. It builds confidence. They tell, here's where I am, or if they even need more practice. So I really am strong on that one. How about if you take the last two?
Okay. So gradual release of responsibility. I think this is one the importance of gradual release maybe gets overlooked more than most people want to admit. But gradual release is like you tell your kiddo that you want to make noodles, but and you just tell them, okay, here, go make noodles in the kitchen, and they have no idea how to make noodles. So so the I do, we do, you do together, and then you do is a gradual release model that allows them to, I'm going to show you how to do this, and you're going to watch me, and then we're going to do it together, and we're going to make sure that we've got it, right? And then once we know we've got it, then you are going to do it together with maybe a small group. Maybe you have a little friend that comes and helps you. And then you do it by yourself. And then they gradually get those things into their to-do list, right? So they gradually get those concepts. They gradually can make noodles. And so they can gradually master a concept. There we go with mastery again. This is not about just basically throwing the kid in the pool and hoping they can swim. This is about you really walking them through every step of whatever they are learning. And so then that instruction has to be grounded in high expectations. And you have to maintain student engagement. You have to maintain motivation. There has to be deep processing of information. It can't just be they heard you in the background. They really got to be in on this, right? And there has to be meta awareness. That's where that comes in. Like if they are aware of what they are learning or not learning, if they're glazing over in the class, they are not being meta, right? And there has to be a celebration of learning. Like there has to be an awareness with those kiddos that they have actually got this and they can feel confident about it and they enjoy learning more because now they realize that they just learned all this cool stuff and now it can help them do all of these things. I see this with little 7-year-olds that I'm working with when we literally just now got into long vowels. They were like, what is a magic E?
I love it.
Yeah.
And I've even consulted at schools and I've recommended that principals, when they are observing teachers, to walk around the room and then just ask the child, what are you learning?
Mhm.
That becomes really an important part of the observation process and the evaluation process of teachers. So we went through this, and now we're going to talk just a little bit more about assessment. So
Mhm.
again, what does it mean to be valid and reliable? That we have these screening instruments that are universal screeners. I'm going to let you speak to that because here you are in a homeschool environment, and you may not have as frequent access to what we know as Dibbles or AimsWeb or FastBridge or SPS Fast.
Yeah.
You may have to have the free CBMs, right? So
Mhm.
talk a little bit about this universal screeners of these sub skills that are necessary, foundational to learn to read.
Yeah. So a lot of homeschoolers don't have access to any kind of screener. There are very, very few of us that even know how to use them, right? And so, but valid and reliable screening instruments that measure targeted subskills for reading are primarily going to be seen in public school or private school settings. Rare in the homeschool world for those to be used. Now, I work primarily with homeschool children, and I use them. So 9 times out of 10, homeschoolers are not going to have access to these unless they're bringing on a private person to kind of help with things. But they have to be equally valid. They have to be equally valid and reliable instruments for monitoring progress. And progress monitoring is huge, because we need to go back and see what those kiddos didn't master. You know, you might think that they're mastering things as they're going, but then you get to here and you realize they didn't master this.
Yeah.
And so that's why we need to progress monitor, and we need to have a reliable tool to do that. Did you want to take the last two, or do you want me to grab them?
Yeah, I'll take the respect language when recording errors and note variants. So there has been a progression in these universal screeners where they're becoming more technological and digital. And one of the concerns that were raised often with the publishers was that we really want to see what the errors are and not just record how many errors. And so when we look at the errors, when you have a highly qualified, trained team that are administering these universal screeners, you can then see that that error may be triangulated with a spelling inventory or a quick phonics screener, not just an oral reading fluency where you're looking at just rate. We want to look at all of the aspects of what it means to be a fluent reader. So you can do that using these universal screeners, but you actually have to do it in person, and you have to make sure these errors are analyzed. So that
Mhm.
becomes really a difference when you're looking at just, am I recording rate, or am I looking at where did the child make a mistake in their writing, in their transcription, in their spelling, and in their understanding of phonics. And institute a system that has clear policies for scheduling, what probes are going to be used, and when, how often. It really has to have a system-wide approach. So
Can I
that really preserves instructional time for the teachers. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Krista.
I just wanted to add, one of the things that I see very often with especially public school moms that come to me with their kiddos documentation that we've told them to keep, um, in session 2, I think it was. One of the things I see really frequently on there is those spelling tests that the kids are coming home with. Those should be a guide as well for assessing what kiddos are learning. It does not have to be a formal assessment to see what the kiddos are or are not mastering. So if you see a spelling test and you're looking at it and there's like vowel teams, they don't have the vowel teams. They do not have, you can literally look at the spelling analysis and see what they're missing and what you need to go back and revisit. And so it doesn't have to be this overly complicated thing. And even for homeschool moms, if you are looking at your kiddos writing and you see on there every time there is a certain concept that they should have mastered, and they keep missing it, maybe that's your clue to go back and revisit that concept. Doesn't have to be fancy.
And I think it's important to speak to spelling. Too often people remember spelling, well, I get this random list of words that I'm going to memorize and then I'm going to spell them all on Friday. That is not recommended and it isn't supported by research. What we really want
Right.
is to teach a pattern, a phonic pattern, so that we could give the child any word that has that pattern on Friday, and they're going to be able to spell it. So it isn't about memorizing, it's about learning these two embedded neurological networks. So
Yep.
let's move on. Well, here's a list. This is quite a list of assessments, but it's a non-exhaustive list. And we really don't want to cover every one, but what we do want to cover are just exposure for you of what you may see in a battery of tests. So you may see concepts
Mhm.
of print, whether a child can hold a book, can turn the page, note where the beginning of a sentence is, read from left to right, and also letter identification and transcription. Can they transcribe upper and lowercase letters? Can they identify them? And then the difference between phonological sensitivity and phonemic awareness. You really want to see these kinds of assessments. So maybe a child is really good at repeating a sentence, or they can count how many words are in a sentence. They even know what a syllable is. And we can do our kinesthetic for a syllable. It's a word or part of a word with one talking vowel. And that comes from
Mhm.
Language Circle Project Read. But it really is important to understand that concept and how we use it foundationally to look at parts of words so that we can build on morphology. And then the beginning sound and then the vowel and everything after it is onsent rhyme. Those are those larger units of speech and language. You will see students come home with that kind of work. Then we get into phonemic awareness. And this is a whole set of skills in and of itself. The ability to hear the first sound and produce that first sound, blending those sounds together, segmenting by tapping those sounds together, or manipulating a sound, like changing one sound for another and realizing that one change changed an entire word. I went from k, at, cat to b, at, bat by changing one sound. Phonics is the sound symbol correspondences, and we are an opaque language. We don't have a one-to-one correspondence. We really don't. So we have things like digraphs, CH. We don't say hin for chin. We have this one sound ch, and we say ch, chin.
Mhm.
Then the fluency we've talked about in our second, but we're going to just mention when we talk about oral reading fluency, we really do have to talk about not just rate. Accuracy, reason phrasing, punctuated expression, prosody, do response pattern analysis alongside of rate. And then you may see silent assessments of vocabulary and comprehension. Those are the big ones, but then we've got a huge list here of others you may see. Spelling inventory, comprehension. It's a whole nother conversation, and I would love to do another video on comprehension all by itself. But predicting, clarifying, questioning, summarizing, text structures, text complexity, and text features all need to be looked at. Tell
Mhm.
Krista, do you remember what my pet peeve was that I shared with the class about comprehension?
No.
Okay, so I go into a meeting and the teacher will say, I've tried everything. He just doesn't comprehend when we know comprehension is a huge neurological construct made up of at least five um, processes that are going on at once in the brain. And so we really have
And
to
fluency,
dive deep into it. Go ahead.
yeah, and fluency does not equal comprehension.
Correct. 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 And then all of the aspects of vocabulary, including semantics, phrasing, looking at multiple meaning words, idioms, figurative language, and then, of course, the rest of the list. So, instructional intervention. Go ahead, Krista.
Instructional intervention, you can have an intervention that's whole group. You can have small groups. You can have one-on-one. Um, so, and going back to what you said earlier, small groups, we have to really know what a small group should be. It should not be 8 kids, right? And so we may need to have both push in and pull out. And there's going to be, I mean, depending on the classroom, that's going to vary depending on your situation. I know that one of the kiddos that I'm working with right now, he has a push in that comes in and helps him. And he doesn't need any additional support. And so I'm kind of monitoring on the side over here. But then I have another kiddo that I'm working with. absolutely needs a pull out, and that pull out cannot be 6 kids, right? It needs to be as close to one-on-one as humanly possible in that particular school. And we need to have a deep understanding of the multi-tiered system of support and the system framework that's in place in our schools.
And that matters so much because we really want to make sure that there is efficiency and effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't want to wait. We want to get rid of that wait to fail model.
Yes.
So acquiring, and this is kind of like our culminating slide here, acquiring the ability to read is imperative, right? I did a presentation the other day and I went on the website Reading is Fundamental and looked at their statistic. 93 million adults are not reading at a proficient fourth grade level. And then 43% of those are functionally illiterate, which means you can't sign a contract, right? You can't read it. I mean, this is frightening. And so what can we do better? Highly qualified leadership and educators. So sometimes even our leaders, our administration, really don't know what to look for when we're talking about evidence-based instruction and structured literacy when it comes to dyslexia.
Mm-hmm.
Go
And
ahead.
I'm afraid they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
You
It's
know,
not a
let's
blame. It's not a blame. It really
let's
isn't.
educate ourselves just a little bit, please. We can't have 100 million and 150 million people in the future in our country that are not functionally literate. We can't. So it's time for that leadership to take ownership here.
Yes. So that means policies and procedures for that proactive early intervention that we talked about that targets specific challenges for our children.
Hmm.
You can do the next couple.
Okay. So, systemic commitment to preserve general education classroom time. We need to make sure that those kiddos are in what we call tier one, which is a whole class. They need to be there and they need to be learning along with everybody else too. So that's what that means. Tier two instruction is not a permanent placement. We need to just accept that now. I know that there are some kiddos that get into tier two and the parents love that additional instruction. But sometimes they just need to come into tier two. They need to kind of fill in the gaps that they've got and then go back to staying in tier one and not get pulled out. And then we also need to move to evaluation for tier three sooner rather than later. Do you want to enhance on that one a little bit? You want to?
Well, I think it's important, especially now in the situation that we're in when it comes to special education services. We do have the response to intervention legislation. So students really, as soon as we find out and have documented and have done all of this with evidence-based, high-quality materials, highly trained teachers and administrators, and we realize that this child is not responding to everything that we've done, and we've documented everything, then we really need to move to evaluation. And that's what that's suggesting. We're not waiting until third grade to start doing anything. We really know the neuroplasticity in the brain is much better when they're young and we can do this work and meet with great success.
Yeah. And I also wanted to add, if your tier two and your tier three is completely flooded, go back to bullet point number one.
Yeah. And also go look at your tier one instruction
Yeah,
because you cannot intervention your way out of poor tier one instruction.
exactly.
So we want to differentiate. We really want to be sensitive to the cultural differences that are in our classroom. That's language, diversity, learning, social emotional needs for every child. All of this is a part of this. And we had talked about that a lot in our second presentation. But the big caution is that students may be placed in a program that they do not need.
Mhm.
And likewise, they may not be placed in a program that they do need, that they really meet the qualifying criteria for.
Yep.
So, Krista, wow. Final takeaways for our time together. I'm going to stop share so we can do those together.
So my biggest final takeaway is if you are listening to this and you are an educator and you have no idea what we just talked about and it went right over your head, it's time to start educating yourself. There's no excuse. I know that you work long hours and you're in the classroom and there's just so much to do, but these kids depend on you educating yourself. And if you are a parent watching this and your child is struggling, use what we just talked about in these last 3 sessions to inform yourself a little bit more and prepare to advocate for your kiddo. If you're a homeschool parent and you are just learning all of this stuff and you think maybe your kid is dyslexic, there are a lot of resources out there. Now, I have to admit that they are pretty hard to find, but if you suspect that your kid is dyslexic, there are resources available to you. I know that in Ohio, there are quite a few. And most states have resources that you can access. So
Yeah, I thank you. So my posture is one of gratitude, Krista, that you shared your time. You're so active and you're such an advocate for so many. And I'm just thrilled that I had the opportunity to just shed some light in this month of awareness on dyslexia. So once again, thank you. If you're looking for programs here at Bay Path, again, I'll remind you that we have our reading and literacy instruction programs. And we also have for the state of Massachusetts, our reading specialist certificate. So have a great day. Thank you, Krista.
thank you for having me. You know, oh, so
We're, we're stopped. We stopped recording.
I just hope that like it reaches the right person,
Yeah.
uh,
Even if
even
it's one,
one.
even if it's one. That one parent, we helped a baby.
Yeah. And when you mentioned about the 96 million adults, I literally really am just trying not to get really visibly emotional about it. It shouldn't have happened. It should
Or,
not have
but
happened.
see, of those 93 million who aren't reading at a fourth grade level, 43% of them are functionally illiterate.
Yeah.
And that means so much in living a life. And then you think about the disparity beyond that, and it's mostly Latino and our Black, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I keep doing what I'm doing. That's why I keep doing what I'm doing because it's just wrong. It's just wrong on so many levels. And we
There's
know what to do. If we didn't know what to do, it'd be different. But we know what to do, right?
we know what to do. And I mean, we literally, where's my book? It's over there falling apart. 25 years, 25 years, you know,
I know.
how is it not better? Where do we start to fix it? Is it higher education?
Yes.
Um,
Yes, but it's also administration. I'm fine. So before my before the my incident, I was in the doctoral program at Bay Path, and I was going to really look at because I'm all but dissertation. I was just going to do the dissertation. I would have been done in this year, and I shared with you what I was going to look at. And I think the more I see and the more I read about this is a problem because people like yourself, or even many of our graduates, are hitting a brick wall the minute they get back into their schools, and they're saying, "We're not doing that."
mhm.
Now what? They've
Yeah.
got all this money invested, they've got all this mastery, they've got all this expertise, and they're sitting in their room and they're having to close the door to give the child what they need.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and I remember Liz. You remember Liz? She was so passionate and wanted to help her kids. And she was going to have to close the door because they literally told her if she implemented all these new things that she was learning, they were going to fire her. And I'm
Yeah,
like, okay, I don't get it.
I don't
Why
get
why would you not want these kids
to learn
to
to read. Right.
yeah. And the frustration, she would text me or she would call me and she would be like, Krista, I don't know what to do, because we were working on OG together. And they were literally threatening her job over it. And she's like, I'm going to lose my job because I want these kids to read, and I'm using evidence-based methods, and they're going to fire me over it.
Yep. Yep.
So
That's
I
sad.
don't understand. And I think that's where the administration really needs to take ownership. You
Well,
know,
good news is, are you ready? I had to write a big proposal. It's called a CAF. It's a something colleges do, but you have to go through governance and you have to have the entire faculty, you present in front of the entire faculty. And then they say yes, they vote yes or no. Well, I presented, everybody loved it. We're all the CAFs that were presented are being voted on, but I have a certificate where administrators, it's called Structured Literacy for Leaders. And they only have to take 12 credits and they get a certificate. They're going to take multimodal. They're going to take Brian's class, the spelling, and they're going to take the comprehension course 548, and then they'll take 536, which is the new course which you don't know yet. But yeah, and that will be leadership change. And I'm so hoping that with, and it'll be in a year. They finish in a year. They do one in the summer, one in the fall, two in the spring, and they're done.
yeah, and they need it. Every one of them.
So I'm hoping it gets marketed and sent out there. All right, my friend, I'm going to actually have lunch and I'm going to rest and do the rest of my day, but I'm stay in touch. Stay in touch. I know you're going to be doing big, great things.
Well, I will stay in touch. So, and I appreciate the opportunity to vent my frustrations on your platform.
No, I love it. Take care, my friend.
Bye.
Bye.